One of the pleasant consequences of making and publishing videos on YouTube is that it exposes you to a wide variety of other individuals who have points of view and questions and comments that enrich the whole experience. A recent example of that is the video that I published here on distortion measurement with analog discovery, and a comment by a viewer asking questions about the methodology that was used in some of the studies that I showed near the end of this video, and that set me off on a quest to find some of the articles that I remember reading and other information that might enable me to answer his question a little better than the one that I was able to dash off in a fraction of a minute or two. So let me show you what I've come up with, and I'm not sure that this is a good idea for, going forward or not, but at any rate, let me put a proposal in front of you and see if you think it's a good idea, and also in carrying out at least the first installment of this idea, I'm going to try to add a little more material to the answer I gave to this question about essentially the methodology for doing studies where human factors are involved. Initially, I found a couple of, actually 3 articles that one of which I had remembered and the other one I found in the course of looking for information of this sort. The one that I remembered is this first one from Audio Engineering magazine in August of '47, and then in the course of looking through other issues of that, I found a follow-up article, or at least a related pair of articles, in May and June of 1949. I'll talk about these in a second, but first, what's the whole idea here? Well, I often do this when someone asks a question or I'm just intrigued by something I read or otherwise am exposed to go back and do searches of old publications looking for some of the early work in an area, because often from that you can get an idea of where these things stood and then move forward into the modern times. So my idea is that when I come across interesting articles like this, maybe what I will do is from time to time make a video, hopefully short, with the specific articles that were of interest to me, and maybe they might be of interest to you. So if you think this is a good idea, let me know. I'm going to range over a wide variety of topics, but in any given video, I'll try to stick to similar topics. So this is going to be a video mostly about the measurement and perception of distortion, hum, and other factors, frequency response, and so on in audio amplifiers. So let's take a look at these 3 articles, starting with the August 47 issue of Audio Engineering. The first article by an author named LaBelle is this one, which appeared in the August 1947 issue of Audio Engineering, entitled Psychoacoustical Aspects of Listener Preference Tests. And in essence, what the author here is trying to do is to provide a kind of overview of the various aspects of these preference tests that he finds of importance. And let me show you a little bit of his conclusions. And once again, I'm not going to try to cover the entire article. It's pretty detailed, and each person will probably be interested in some part of it and maybe not in others. So I'm not going to do, this isn't a review of a paper. This is more a kind of overview of what does this paper show us. The paper talks about a study using over 1,000 individual listeners, using popular music and classical music of the time. Remember, we're talking 1947. So popular music there probably wasn't any rap, but there probably was the early beginnings of rock and roll, and at any rate, I'm not sure exactly what all the music is. But what he was trying to determine is, what do you have to measure in order to determine what people are hear when they, or what they prefer when they listen to music. So let's take a look, for example, at one of the charts that is presented here, and you'll notice that on the left is the test pair. I'm having a little trouble getting this to all show up in the... Here we are, is the test pair, and then next to that is the range in cycles for that test, the type of music, classical and popular, and then male and female voices or vocals. So this is the sort of thing. Let me kind of show you what the conclusion, or at least the structure of this study was all about. After doing these studies, the author concluded that there were a series of areas in which he felt his study was deficient. They are in physiological acoustics, that's the actual structure of the ear and so on. Architectural acoustics, he's referring there to the particular room or environment that you listen in. The next is psychoacoustics, and that's an area that is very, very difficult, more has to do with mood than it does to listening. Then electroacoustics, and there what he's talking about is the actual electrical reproduction. Then the next one is psychology, and finally statistics. And what he means by statistics is you have to make sure that you're actually conducting a study that is statistically relevant. For example, you need to make sure that both the subjects as well as the people doing the study do not know what it is they are measuring. In other words, if you take a group of people who work for Macintosh, for example, and you ask them to listen to amplifiers, and they know that some of them are the amplifiers that produce their livelihood, and others are not, well, you've introduced so much bias into the study that the results are going to be gibberish. Similarly, if the study is conducted by people who owe their living to Macintosh, and we're not talking here about dishonesty. We're not talking about people being bribed to do one thing or another. We're just talking about pure bias in the study. So when neither the subjects nor the people conducting the experiment know what is behind the experiment, you then have what's called a double-blind study, and that is basically what this paper is discussing, and I found it very interesting. I hope you will as well. The next two papers, which appeared in the May and June 1949 issues of Audio Engineering, are entitled Problems in Audio Engineering by Goodfriend. And part of this study is looking at the structure of the inner ear and how it works, and then a look at things like the interaction between various factors, some of which are graphed here. Let me talk about this chart just a little bit, and then I'll give you a little bit of an overview of the rest of this paper. On the y-axis is differential sensitivity, and what that means is the sensitivity of the listener to a difference in sound. And along the x-axis is frequency in cycles. On the left is 20 cycles, and on the right is 20,000 cycles. And you'll see the typical issue of the ear is very insensitive to low frequencies. In fact, when you get down into the 20 hertz, or actually below about 100 hertz, most of what you think you're hearing, you're actually feeling through your other senses. Your sense of feel, for example. Your body is actually being vibrated by these. And one of the reasons that boom boxes tend to carry so far isn't because your ear is sensitive to that. It's that your body is actually sensitive to these low sounds. Also, low sounds tend to carry further. So the interesting thing is that the ear response, probably a result of our surviving in the jungle 500,000 years ago or so, is less sensitive to low frequencies, and yet it's the low frequencies that tend to propagate long distances. And then, as you probably know, most of us begin to lose hearing sensitivity around 10,000 cycles, and as we get out to about 20,000, most people can't hear 20,000 even when they're young. As they get older, that high frequency limit begins to fall down. Here, the distinction is made between the feeling, that is, the levels at which we feel a sound rather than hear it, and then the curves of actual hearing. The reason that that's important is, once again, you may notice that your feeling for sound is relatively flat out to an area, and then at frequencies at which you become very good at hearing the frequency, the sound, out in the 2,000 to 5,000 hertz range, your feeling also becomes better. Basically, look on this as the higher the number, the less feeling you have. At the end of the article, the author, or the second article, the author talks about the fact that the perception of I'm going to quote here, the perception of the qualities which are almost undefinable, timbre, tremolo, vibrato, duration, rise time, and decay, are the factors that distinguish one musical instrument, one voice, or one sound from another when sounded at the same frequency and intensity. And what he's basically saying is that music is so complex that it's virtually impossible to study things across a variety of instruments, a variety of people, and a variety of conditions. You wind up with so many variables that you just can't study the perception of things of that sort in any kind of scientific way. So this has been one of the problems in this area for a long time, is you really do need to restrict the range. So, for example, if you're studying orchestral music in a concert hall, you might be able to get people to perceive differences between one concert hall and another, between one orchestra and another. But if you try to use a study like that to determine, do the violins sound better in this hall than that one, or do the piccolos come through better in Carnegie Hall than in the Philadelphia Symphony Hall, the answer is you can't do that kind of thing. So what he's really talking about is there are many, many problems in audio engineering that result from factors that just multiply the possibilities. Returning to our list of articles I found interesting, one of the earliest ones is a May 1946 Wireless World article on negative feedback and hum. You may recall I did a video a few weeks or a month or two ago on the effect of global and local feedback on things like noise and hum. This is one of the earliest articles on that aspect. The next one, which appeared in August of the same year, 1946, is an article on the output stage, that is the output stage of an audio amplifier. And Finally, or next in list, is April 47, an article entitled High Quality Amplifier. This is an especially important article in the history of hi-fi amplifiers because this is what used to be called the Williamson amplifier. The Williamson amplifier was an attempt to correct many of the perceived problems of the day and was one of the first amplifiers to actually use feedback to try to correct for problems that were difficult to reduce in other ways. The next one is an August 47 issue of Wireless World in which they talk about push-pull phase splitters. And phase splitting is an issue that has been a problem for a long time. What you want is to split the phase of a signal in a way that doesn't distort it with regard to, in other words, you want the positive phase and the negative phase to be exact reproductions of the input signal. And there are many problems in doing that, and this article talks about some of those. The next one is on push-pull balance. And once again, this is a question of making sure that in a push-pull stage that you actually are producing the same characteristics in the positive direction as in the negative direction. And this involves all sorts of things, both within the amplifier as well as differences between the speaker impedance reflected back into the amplifier and so on. And the last one of the Wireless World articles was the December 78 Part 5 of a series called Audio Power Amplifier Design that I talked about in an earlier video having to do with a question that a student had asked about whether distortion introduces, feedback, negative feedback introduces additional distortion. And so I talk about that in another video. A couple of articles that are personally interesting to me appeared in Electronic Technician magazine. One in July of '56 and the second in December of '56. Both of these were written by a gentleman that had a lot of impact on me. I never met him, but I read a lot of his articles. His name was Norman Crowhurst. The first one is on hi-fi tests with the scope, and what he's trying to show in this article is how you can actually use music and an oscilloscope to look for or to get a kind of subjective evaluation of a hi-fi system. The second one is an article on frequency response errors in hi-fi audio amplifiers. And what he's talking about here, and one of the points he makes, is that a lot of people think that an amplifier that's relatively flat across the passband is the best amplifier or the best sounding amplifier. And what he shows in here is that's not always true. Sometimes it's more what the characteristics are. For example, if the amplifier is relatively flat across most of the band but then peaks in the treble end, it'll sound quite different than an amplifier that maybe has more overall change from one end to the other but no stark changes in a particular frequency band. Then, in Audio magazine, there are a sequence of 3 articles by unrelated authors but with related ideas that appeared in the June 1957 issue that I found interesting. The first has to do with hum specification measurements and how that it is not as easy to do a specification of hum as you think. For example, there's a big difference between a percentage relative to a power level, and depending on how you choose your hum specification, you can make powerful amplifiers look better than they really are, or you can make less powerful amplifiers look better than they are just simply by the way you write the specification for how you're going to measure hum. The next thing is a really good article on output transformer specifications. If you're interested in studying how an output transformer can be measured in the lab, and this is not a complicated measurement. He uses a simple resistance-capacitance bridge to do his transformer measurements. But this is an excellent article for those of you that are interested in, for example, trying to figure out what transformer will match with what set of tubes. And finally, the last is the transformer impedance transformation article, which goes with this transformer specification article. They are by different authors, but basically what he's talking about here is the effect of the primary and secondary on the impedance calculations for transformers. Once again, these last two are for tube amplifiers because, of course, solid-state amplifiers tend to be direct coupled. So I hope that this is of interest to people. If there is sufficient interest in continuing this kind of thing, well, then I will do some more on this line, not necessarily about audio engineering or about the audio aspects, but rather as I run across a series of articles that on a related topic. If you would like to see this kind of thing, we'll say so. If it meets with relative stunning indifference, well, I'll certainly be willing to spend my time on some other areas. I'll still do the research. I'll still be doing the magazine articles because that's what I like to do, among other things, but I just won't make the videos. So, once again, hope you enjoyed it. If so, let me know. If you didn't enjoy this one, but you have another set of another issue or a kind of topic that you think might be a good place to do some research, we'll talk about that as well. But in the meantime, have a nice day.